Before the video starts, I would like to thank you all for such wonderful support, and I can't begin to tell you how much that means to me. If you haven't checked out the rest of our videos, make sure to check out our channel and hit the subscribe button. Now, without further ado, enjoy the video. The Druids. Shrouded in mystery, these holy peoples of the Ancient Celts stood as spiritual and governmental leaders in Britain, Ireland, and France, and date back to over 2,400 years ago. So little is known about them outside of second-hand accounts, mostly from Roman texts. They acted as oracles, blending spirituality and magic with government and politics. More modern adaptations of Druid-like characters portray them as kind of Merlin-like, or possibly something you'd find on the cover of a 1970s rock album. But there are so many interesting and strange facts about them that most people don't know. So, without further ado, here is my list of the top 5 facts about the Druids. As stated, the practices of the Druids are still majorly a mystery. This is due in part to the type of practices they followed, such as magic, mathematics, and philosophy. Concepts which at the time were esoteric in nature, and reserved only for the elites, such as themselves. The other ruling class in the region at the time, called equites or nobles, were more of a governmental class which controlled land, with the Druids being in charge of organizing worship, divination, and law. With the approach of the Roman legion spreading its empire into northwestern Europe, the fear of giving such powers over to Caesar was ever present in the minds of the Druids. They met in secret locations like forests and caves, according to Roman author Pomponius Mela. Their rituals, tediously memorized by heart, could take up to 20 years to learn. Their study of spirituality was so well controlled and secret that there remains no evidence or examples of Druidic literature to this day. As stated earlier, the Master Druids were in charge of judicial procedure in the northwest region of Europe. This meant that when a civil dispute was in question, they were called upon to form reason and verdict out of it. The tenets of their order led to a very strict and orderly lifestyle, which made them the perfect judges for such cases. Their order cared about the well-being of humans and nature, immortality of the soul, and the connection between logic and reasoning. This made them nearly infallible, and therefore their say was final when conducting a court. In some medieval literature, like the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Merlin was not only a court magician, but also a moral and spiritual guide to Arthur when his thoughts became corrupted. Merlin, a character adaptation of the Druids, perfectly displayed the type of Druidic wisdom that one would need to assist in decision-making regarding the future of a kingdom, let alone many kingdoms, such as his inspiration. While it is true that the Romans recorded accounts of Druids practicing religious rituals in secrecy, what do accounts tell us about the mysticism we commonly associate with them? Well, the accounts of classical authors tell a very interesting tale. According to the works of Artemidorus of Theseus, there was a tribe of Druidic women who lived on the Ile de Seine in Brittany called the Galizenais. The Ile de Seine was a place strictly inhabited by women who would travel to the mainland to find husbands and never actually allow them to set foot on the island. The previously quoted Roman author Pomponius Mela wrote of these women, calling them spiritual healers and guides to those who sought them, and that they had special powers, such as the ability to cause storms, shapeshift into animals, and cure diseases. In many other accounts, however, one special ability among the Druids is mentioned over and over again. Along with Mela's accounts, the Historia Augusta, a 160-year spanned piece of literature which documents the leaders of Rome in first-hand accounts, states that both male and female Druids had the ability of foresight or clairvoyance. They could see the future and predict upcoming events, many of which came true. Because of this, nobles and higher-class non-Druids were fascinated and would oftentimes ask the Druids to assist them in telling their future. Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Severus Alexander was given a prophecy regarding his death by a Druidess, which eventually became true. While it is no surprise that the Druids followed astrological events like the seasonal solstices and patterns of the movement of constellations, what may be surprising is how far they would go to practice the spirituality behind them. One of the most famous of all ancient structures in Europe is the giant monoliths at Stonehenge. This massive circular structure consists of an outer ring of 30 trilithons standing 13 feet tall and 7 feet wide, a middle ring made of smaller blue stones, and at the center, 5 larger trilithons with the shape of a horseshoe. The stones in total weigh a whopping 25 tons and were brought from 20 miles away according to the composition of the sarsen stones used in the outer ring. This structure was constructed during the Bronze Age around 2200 to 3000 BC by early Celtic peoples, the first of which were the windmill peoples, who dug the mounds and furrows surrounding the monuments and used the grounds as a place of worship. When the windmill people died, they used the site for collective burials for the deceased. Still to this day, bone fragments of these people can be found and dated to 3000 BC. After the windmill people died off, the bell beaker people of ancient Britain began to work on this site around 2000 BC, before the Wessex people came to finish it around 1500 BC. The Wessex builders of Stonehenge left their legacy on the then 1.5 millennia-year-old structure by carving their famous bronze dagger sigil into one of the stones. But what does that have to do with the Druids? Well, the windmill people, the bell beakers, and the ancient Wessex people were all a part of the ancient Celtic peoples, who shared similar cultures and practices, especially when it came to pagan spirituality and astrological observance. In conclusion, Stonehenge was built by pre-Druidic Celts who eventually became the Druids. Wicker men were large cage structures made to look like a human form, which, at least according to Julius Caesar's written account, were used in ritualistic human sacrifice. In Druidic belief, the ending of a human life was essential to the bounty of nature and agriculture. Most of the victims burned to a crisp inside this torturous demise were not example citizens, but in fact criminals and prisoners found guilty by trial. The ashes were believed to cause crop fields to become abundant, and therefore the harvest plentiful. Greek writer Diodorus Siculus wrote in his book the Bibliotheca Historica that large square pyres were also used in place of the wicker man, where the humans or animals that were being burned would be placed along with the first fruits and vegetables picked from the year. This practice was probably not used on any mass scale, but there is evidence of sacrifice by burning that would suggest the tales Greek writers wrote about were somewhat true regarding the wicker man. Did you find any of these facts interesting? If so, comment below. And I thank you again for joining us on the Eleusinian Society.